Right, more stuff. Are you overwhelmed? Was that a lot of stuff written down from the last one? The initial steps of trigonometry, especially if you haven't seen it before, makes this a very big uphill climb. There's a lot of memorization at the beginning and not a lot of why. So I'm doing my best to try and explain why things are true, but a little tricky to get all this stuff dialed. So hopefully you can follow my direction where I tell you just memorize sine and cosine, and there's tricks for everything else. Actually, I just memorize sine, and then I get everything else for free. So I wrote down our 4 quadrantial angles: 0 degrees, which is the same as 0 radians; 90 degrees, which is the same as pi over 2. These are just 2 different units of measure, right? Like Fahrenheit and Celsius. Just 2 different ways of measuring an angle. So they're the same thing. And you can always tell a radian doesn't have the degree symbol, and degrees have the degree symbol. So we're going to look at those 4 quadrantial angles. I did write down 360 degrees because that's coterminal to 0 degrees. You get the same answer. So what we have is, there's the values we found from last time. At 0 degrees, sine of 0 is 0, cosine of 0 is 1, tangent of 0 is 0. And so on, going around to all 4 quadrants. But we also have our reciprocals. We have this thing, cosecant of an angle is 1 over y. But I don't want us to think 1 over y. I want us to think about it this way. It's 1 over sine. And then we have this thing called secant, which is 1 over cosine. And then we have some cotangent, which is 1 over tangent. Now, I don't want you writing it as 1 over sine and then getting confused and all that stuff. I just want us to kind of think what's up. So let's look at our 0 degrees here. When we're at 0, when we're at 90, actually I say, don't think of it that way, and then I'm going to make you think about it that way, but soon we're going to see that. Or you won't. I think that makes sense. So we're going to say cosecant of 0 degrees is 1 over whatever sine is at 0. That's 1 over, oh, that's undefined. That's undefined. That's really bad. We can't have that. We can't have that. So cosecant of 0 is undefined. Cosecant of 90 is just 1 over whatever the sine value is there at 90. Oh, that's 1. 1 over 1 is equal to 1. Cosecant of 180. So that's going to be 1 over 0, which is also going to be undefined. And then cosecant of 270 is going to be, what is it? 1 over negative 1, which is equal to negative 1. Now, don't memorize these values. The cosecants, the secants, the cotangents, do not memorize those values. Please don't memorize those values. We're just going to think, well, if you already know sine, it's just going to be 1 divided by sine at that value. So just memorizing sine. And remember, please don't be short-sighted and continue to use a unit circle next to you when you're practicing and not memorize anything, because you're going to be required to reproduce this in person. All right, we want good grades, not bad grades, huh? And now we could go around with the secants, which now we're just going to be looking at our cosine values. 1 divided by that number for each one of these angles. So let me actually change my color up just so it kind of, so we say, wow, not what I wanted. So secant of 0 degrees is 1 over whatever cosine is. That's 1. Secant of 90 degrees. That's going to be 1 over whatever cosine is at 90. That's 0. Uh-oh, undefined. Never divide by 0. What about secant of 180 degrees? Well, it's 1 divided by whatever cosine is. That's negative 1. So we get negative 1. And lastly, we get secant of 270, which is going to be 1 over what is cosine of 270? It's 0, so it's undefined again. Next, we're going to go into cotangent, which is 1 over tangent, but we have all of those values. Oh my goodness. What are we going to do now? So let's switch it up again. Use a different color. So we're going to say, well, what's cotangent of 0 degrees? So it's 1 divided by 0. That's undefined. All right. Cotangent of 90 degrees. So we're like, all right, 1 divided by undefined. Well, you can't write that. That's nonsense. And I'm going to tell you something that's incorrect, but it's totally correct. But it's incorrect. Write this down. 0, undefined. Here's 0. 0 over 1. Here's undefined. 1 over 0. That's not correct over on the right-hand side. It is, but it's not. But it is, but it's not. But it's not. These are, do you remember this term? These are reciprocals. They're reciprocals, right? If you flip them over, they're the same thing. Now, this is incorrect, but it's totally correct. The reciprocal of 0 is undefined. The reciprocal of undefined is 0. Essentially, when we're doing cotangent, this 1 over tangent just means flip it over and find its reciprocal. Since tangent is undefined at 90 degrees, it'll say cotangent must be 0. Did you catch it? Don't worry, I'm going to use that quite a bit throughout the class. Now let's look at cotangent of 180. So we're going to get 1 over, right? It's 1 over tangent, 1 over 0. But all we're saying is we're going to take 0 and flip it over. What's the reciprocal of 0? Undefined. Now let's go to cotangent of 270. And that's going to be 1 over undefined. Oh, we can't write that. What's the reciprocal of undefined? It's 0. So there are all the values of the quadrantial angles. And again, don't memorize all of these. Don't memorize them. Memorize sine and cosine. Sine and cosine. If you try and memorize everything, well, some of y'all are badasses and have great memories. You're going to find a bunch of struggles. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. We're going to work on being experts with sine and cosine. And then we're going to use tricks like the reciprocal of 0 is undefined and other random stuff like that. Like let's look through this. Define cosecant of 0. I would just look at sine of 0 and go, what's the reciprocal of 0? Undefined. That's why it's undefined. But I don't know. You do you. We're going to see lots and lots and lots of this stuff. So soon I think we'll do a couple of things about coterminal, and then we'll start building some triangles, and we'll get away from this unit circle thing. I use the unit circle just because it's really hard to make a triangle with 90-degree angles. Here's a right triangle. Now what I'd like you to do is connect it and make one of these two angles, either this one or this one, be 0 degrees or 90 degrees. And tell me what type of triangle that pops out. It's not a triangle. So that's why I have to show this with the unit circle. And now we're going to start moving into where we're going to continue using this, but we're going to start building triangles. You know, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The stuff I know you're going to be pro with. So hang on, do your best through this section. I know it's kind of rough. But excuse me. We'll get through it. All right, see you in the next.